I'm Alyssa Vallis, 29, sitting in the bridal suite of our Napa vineyard. It was 11 p.m., the night before my wedding, and everything felt perfect. Gown steamed, vows written. My mother, Cynthia, glided in with a glass of our reserve Pinot Noir. For your nerves. Darling, she said, smiling as I lifted the glass. Mom, thank you for being here, I whispered, thinking we were toasting to my future. I didn't know I was drinking poison. That was my mistake. As the drug hit my veins, the door banged open. My sister Haley stood there, gripping antique sheep shears. Her scream cut through the haze. Shave her head. Or, I exposed the books to Tyler. I tried to move, but my limbs were lead. The last thing I heard was the cold snap of steel blades. Before I tell you what I saw in the mirror the next morning, drop a comment Team Truth if you'd burn the house down, or Team Peace if you'd walk away. I need to know who has my back. I woke up on the floor. The morning sun was slicing through the curtains. Too bright. Too cheerful for the crime scene I was lying in. My mouth tasted like ash and expensive grapes. For a second, I didn't remember. I just felt a strange, cold draft on the back of my neck. Then I saw it. Thick, dark waves of hair scattered across the hardwood like dead leaves. I stood up. My legs were heavy, but my mind was snapping into focus with terrifying speed. I walked to the vanity mirror. It wasn't a haircut. It was a butchery. My scalp was a landscape of raw, red skin and jagged stubble. There were nicks where the shears had bitten too deep. Little beads of dried blood dotting the pale skin. I looked like a prisoner of war. Panic tried to claw its way up my throat. I felt the scream building. A hot, desperate sound that wanted to shatter the windows. But I swallowed it back down. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I stared at my reflection until the stranger in the mirror stopped looking like a victim and started looking like a weapon. They expected me to run. That was the plan. Humiliate her. Break her. Make her flee in shame so they can spin the story. Poor Alyssa. Having a breakdown. Poor Alyssa. Leaving Tyler at the altar. If I left now, I would be the unstable daughter who couldn't handle the pressure. They would keep the money, keep the vineyard, and keep their reputation. I would lose everything. I touched the cold glass of the mirror. Leaving saves only me. Staying destroys them. I walked to the door and turned the lock. Click. That was the sound of the trap snapping shut. But not on me. On them. I went to the bathroom sink and turned on the tap. I washed the dried blood from my scalp with cold water. It stung. Sharp and grounding. I dried my face. Then I reached for my makeup bag. I didn't apply bridal makeup. I applied war paint. Foundation to cover the tear tracks. I hadn't cried. Contour to sharpen the jawline. Dark eyeliner that made my eyes look less like doe and more like wolf. I wasn't preparing to walk down an aisle. I was preparing to walk into a courtroom. I picked up my phone. My hands were steady. I scrolled past the missed calls from the wedding planner. Past the sweet good morning text from Tyler. I found the number for Aunt Patricia. The only person in this valley who hated my parents as much as I did now. She was the one who had been ousted from the family business 10 years ago for asking too many questions. I typed 3 words. Bring the ledger. I hit send. Then I sat in the chair by the window, watching the guests' cars begin to line up down the long driveway. I waited. Anger wasn't loud this time. It was clinical. It was a balance sheet. And I was about to call in the debt. I pulled the silk stockings up my legs. My hands didn't shake. The room smelled of lavender sachets and the faint, copper scent of blood I hadn't quite scrubbed away. I reached for the dress. It was a couture gown, costing $12,000, paid for by Tyler's family because my parents claimed all their assets were tied up in the harvest. That was a lie. My parents didn't have assets tied up. They had emptied them. As I fastened the pearl buttons, I let myself look at the numbers. I didn't need a spreadsheet. They were burned into my retinas. My grandmother, Veda, had left me a trust fund, $1,200,000. It was meant to be my freedom. It was meant to be the capital I would use to start my own firm. My parents stole it, every single cent. They didn't steal it to save the vineyard. They stole it to fund Haley, my sister, the influencer, with 50,000 bot followers and a closet full of designer bags she didn't pay for. While I was out in the fields at 4 a.m, installing drip irrigation systems with my own hands to save our vines from the worst drought in a decade, Haley was in Paris, or Milan, or Tulum, spending my inheritance on content creation. I was the one who analyzed the soil pH. I was the one who negotiated with the water board. I was the one who kept the Vallis estate from turning into a dust bowl. And yet, at every dinner party, my father would toast to Haley's global brand while I sat in the corner, smelling of fertilizer and exhaustion. I used to wonder why. Why did they worship the daughter who drained them and despise the daughter who saved them? It defied all logic. But as I looked at the stranger in the mirror, applying a layer of concealer to the bruise on my temple, the answer finally clicked into place. It wasn't a mystery. It was narcissism. My parents didn't love Haley. They loved the reflection of themselves they saw in her. She was the shiny, shallow, perfect projection of the life they wanted to believe they lived. She was the fantasy, and me, I was the reality check. I was the one who knew the bank accounts were empty. I was the one who knew the grapes were shriveling. When they looked at me, they didn't see a daughter. They saw a mirror reflecting their failures, their debt, and their fraud. I was the living proof of their incompetence. To keep their delusion alive, they had to destroy the mirror. That's why they shaved my head. It wasn't just to stop me from exposing the books. It was to humiliate the truth-teller. They wanted to make me so ugly, so broken, that no one would believe a word I said. They wanted to shatter the mirror so they could go back to staring at their beautiful, golden lie. I had stayed for 10 years because I loved this land. I thought if I worked hard enough, if I sacrificed enough, I could save the legacy my grandmother built. But you can't save a garden when the roots are drinking poison. I picked up the wig they had left on the bed. It was a heavy, synthetic thing. I put it on. It felt like a suffocating helmet, but it was necessary. I needed to look like the compliant victim for just 1 more hour. I needed them to think they had won. Right up until the moment I burned their fantasy to the ground. I unlocked the door. I had barely taken my hand off the knob when it swung open. My father, Richard, filled the frame. He didn't look at my face. He looked at my head. He let out a breath that sounded like steam escaping a pressure valve. "Good," he said. "You're decent." He walked past me, checking his watch. The photographer from Architectural Digest is setting up in the solarium. We are 20 minutes behind schedule. My mother, Cynthia, followed him in. She was wearing a silk robe that cost more than my car. She was holding a bottle of hairspray and a comb, like she was coming to fix a stray flyaway, not hide a felony. She walked up to me and reached out. I flinched. She didn't even notice. She just tugged the edge of the wig, centering it on my bruised forehead. It's a little dense, she critiqued, tilting her head. But it will photograph well enough. Just keep your chin down. You drugged me, I said. My voice was flat. I wasn't asking. I was stating a fact. Cynthia let out a sharp, irritated sigh. Oh, Alyssa. Stop being so dramatic. It was a relaxant. You were spiraling. We did it for you. And the shears, I asked. Was that for me too? Haley was stressed. My father cut in from the window, where he was inspecting the lawn for imperfections. She's under a lot of pressure with the brand launch. Things got out of hand. It was a prank. Alyssa. A sisterly spat. Don't turn it into a tragedy. A sisterly spat. They had held me down and stripped me of my dignity. And they were calling it a spat. She demanded I shave my head, or she'd expose the books. I said, That's extortion. That is family, Richard spun around, his face reddening. We do what is necessary to protect this name. If you hadn't been so stubborn about the audit, none of this would have happened. You forced her hand. There it was. The victim blaming. It wasn't their fault for committing the violence. It was my fault for making them do it. We don't have time for this, Cynthia said, smoothing the shoulders of my dress. The investors are arriving at noon. If you go down there and act sullen, you will cost us everything. Put on a smile. Do it for the vineyard. The door opened again. Haley sauntered in. She was already dressed in her maid of honor gown, a shimmering gold thing that screamed for attention. She was holding a crystal flute of mimosa. She looked at me, looked at the wig, and smirked. Honestly, she said, taking a sip, it's an improvement. You always looked so severe with your hair pulled back. This softens you. You should thank me. She walked over to the mirror and checked her own reflection, ignoring the person standing behind her. Did you tell her about the photo rights? She asked Dad. I want exclusive usage for my Instagram before the magazine runs the spread. We'll discuss it later, Richard muttered. I watched them, the three of them, bickering about photo rights and schedules, while I stood there with my scalp throbbing under synthetic hair. They didn't care. They didn't feel an ounce of remorse. To them, I wasn't a person. I was a prop. I was a mannequin that had been slightly damaged in transit, patched up just enough to get through the show. I'll be ready, I said. The words tasted like bile. I just need a minute to get my shoes. 5 minutes. Richard barked. Don't make me come back up here. They filed out, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and toxicity in their wake. I watched the door close. The last ember of hope, the tiny. The foolish part of me that thought they might apologize died. And in its place, a cold, dark resolve took root. They wanted a show. I would give them a show. I locked the door and waited until their footsteps faded down the corridor. My body hummed with the adrenaline of a soldier behind enemy lines. I moved the chair away from the window and slipped out of the room, keeping to the shadows. I knew the estate's layout better than the architects. I had spent my childhood exploring every crawl space and cellar, while Haley practiced her poses in the garden. I made my way to the old fermentation cellar. It was a relic from the original winery my grandmother built, abandoned by my parents because it smelled too much like work. It was damp, cool, and perfect. Tyler was already there, pacing near a stack of oak barrels. He looked pale. When he saw me, his eyes widened, landing instantly on the wig. Alyssa, he breathed. Tell me they didn't. They did, I said, removing the synthetic helmet and tossing it onto a barrel. It's worse than you think. Aunt Patricia stepped out from the shadows. She was holding a heavy, leather-bound ledger. She looked at my scalp, her expression hardening into something terrifying. I knew they were desperate, she said, her voice low. I didn't know they were monsters. Did you bring it? I asked. She slammed the ledger onto the barrel head. Every transaction for the last 10 years. I still have back-end access to the accounting software. They never changed the passwords because they assumed I was too stupid to use a computer. We gathered around the book. Tyler pulled out his phone to use as a flashlight. We didn't need to look for embezzlement. We knew it was there. We needed to find the leverage, Haley had said. I exposed the books. That meant she knew something specific, something devastating. Start with the trust fund, I said. Show Tyler where the money went. Patricia flipped the pages. Here. May 12th. 4 years ago. Transfer of $1. $2 million from the Veda Trust to the operating account. Then, over the next 6 months, transfers to H. Vallis expenses, travel, clothing, PR firms, bot farms for social media engagement. Tyler stared at the numbers. They drained your inheritance to buy her followers, to buy their image. I corrected. Haley is just the billboard. Keep looking, I told Patricia. There has to be something else. Haley wouldn't threaten them over money she already spent. She has something on them. Something illegal. Patricia scanned the ledger and froze. Here, $200,000 to Consulting Services LLC. And another to something called Witness Protection Fund. That isn't real. That's a memo line. What's the date? I asked. October 14th, 2019. The bottom dropped out of my stomach. The harvest party. The night the migrant worker was hit on the highway. Tyler looked up. The unsolved hit and run. Haley came home late. I whispered. Her car was damaged. She said she hit a deer. Dad took it to a private shop the next morning. Patricia kept typing. There's a follow-up payment to that mechanic. $20,000 cash. And recurring transfers to a private investigator who specializes in cleanup. It wasn't just financial fraud. It was a cover-up. Haley had killed a man. And my parents used my college fund to bury it. They're not just thieves, Tyler said. They're accessories. And Haley knows it. I added. That's her leverage mutual destruction. I told Tyler he could walk away. Instead, he took my hand. Burn it down. Alyssa. So we did. Patricia scheduled the evidence to reach the district attorney at 2:30 p.m., the moment I would be standing at the altar. At the ceremony. Surrounded by 200 guests, and my parents' desperate ambition. I tore off the wig, hiding my brutalized scalp. Gasps rippled across the garden. I'm not having a breakdown, I said calmly. I'm having a breakthrough. With my grandmother's lace veil framing the scars, I walked to the microphone and ended the wedding. Patricia hit play. The audio of Haley ordering my head shaved filled the air. The ledger appeared on the screen, every hush payment, every date. Sirens began to wail. Police swarmed the lawn. My father lunged. But it was over. Their empire collapsed in minutes. Months later, the estate is seized. My parents are awaiting trial. And Haley sits in custody with no bail. I live quietly now. Hair slowly returning. Breathing clean air for the first time. They tried to bury me.